Not every zombie apocalypse gives you the same odds of making it out alive. Some let you fight back with rules, tools, and time, while others erase every advantage a survivor could ever build. The Last of Us hands infection to fungus. Resident Evil weaponizes it in labs, and Dead Space turns entire moons into the enemy. That's why today I'm ranking the 7 worst zombie outbreaks in fiction from most survivable to absolute extinction, starting with the one where safety might just mean staying alive long enough to die peacefully. The Walking Dead. You are either the most prepared survivor in fiction, or you're sleeping next to a bomb that goes off the moment your heart stops. And in this world, both of those things are true at the same time. Because once you understand the rule, this apocalypse gets almost boring to survive. The walkers are slow, they're stupid, destroy the brain, and they go down. Years pass this way. People fall in love, raise kids, and plant gardens inside the walls. In the comics, the walker's origin remains unanswered. Robert Kirkman ended that story on purpose, without ever naming a cause. The television series took its own path and never landed on an answer either. Some fans call it the Walker virus. Nobody in either continuity gives you a lab, a patient zero, or an exact outbreak date. Here's the part that should bother you more than any bite ever does. You don't need to get bitten to become one of them. Most, if not every, human being is believed to carry the condition, and death without damage to the brain can trigger reanimation. A heart attack does it. A stroke does it. Old age, sitting quietly in a chair on a peaceful afternoon surrounded by people who love you, does it. Reanimation can happen within hours, though the timing swings wildly from person to person for reasons not established in the evidence here. So bites matter for a different reason. A bite does not directly cause reanimation. It is portrayed as almost automatically fatal, and death is followed by reanimation, which means the dormant condition inside you was always going to finish the job eventually, lose the bitten limb fast enough, in the show at least, and sometimes you walk away human. That's the trade-off this world offers you. Courage, speed, and a hatchet can save your life. Your own body is a different problem entirely. You can dodge every herd, clear every walker, win every fight, and still lose to a blood clot at 65. That is the quiet horror inside a safe zone. You can wall off a whole town from the herds outside. You can't wall it off from the woman who dies peacefully in her sleep 3 doors down, because the danger may already be closer than the walls can stop. That hard-won control collapses the instant you imagine a different kind of threat, one that doesn't wait for your heart to stop, one that moves through the air itself and turns the person standing next to you before you even finish the sentence you were saying to them. Days later, you have roughly 10 to 20 seconds. That's the gap between a healthy person and a sprinting one. And that gap deletes the entire survival toolkit built by the last outbreak. All the patience, the careful study, the safe observation window from behind a fence, gone the moment a single drop of infected blood lands in an eye. That's the mechanism here. The rage virus is described as a blood-borne infection. It needs blood or saliva to reach an eye, a mouth, an open wound, and once it does, the person standing next to you is gone before you can finish saying their name. You don't get to watch someone change slowly, weigh whether to help them, decide how much risk you're willing to eat for loyalty. You get a shove, a spray, a scream, and then you're sprinting from someone you were protecting 30 seconds earlier. There's a detail buried in that speed that's arguably scarier than the speed itself. This isn't presented here as a virus that stitches corpses back together and sends them shambling down the street. The infected are alive. They breathe hard, they bleed out, they climb stairs like anyone in a hurry, and critically, that biology has a limit. In 28 days later, that limit eventually catches up with the infected. The infected population eventually collapses as the living hosts starve, and the quiet spreads back across London along with it. For one movie, that's almost a happy ending. A disease with an expiration date is a disease you can outlast, provided you survive long enough to watch it starve on schedule. Then 28 weeks later introduces a new complication for anyone trying to rebuild. Some carriers never show symptoms at all. They look fine, they talk fine, they can hold you, kiss you, hand you a canteen with a steady hand, and the entire time they may be carrying a threat to the people around them. A blood sample can identify a carrier, but only if somebody thinks to draw one before the kiss instead of after. The film's reinfection sequence is built around exactly that idea. An asymptomatic carrier transmits the rage virus and triggers a new outbreak. Weeks later does not make rebuilding look easy. Its reinfection sequence shows how quickly a new outbreak can undo it, and the pattern the films do show is brutal enough on its own. A healthy-looking carrier can still be a threat, but a blood sample identifies Alice as a carrier only after the damage is already loose in the population. The safest looking person in the room is precisely the one you cannot verify just by looking at. The sprinting attackers eventually burn out, but a healthy looking kiss can restart the disaster. World War ZA. A slow-moving threat still finds a way to spread across the globe, and the mechanism isn't what you'd expect. That's the part that should bother you. Solanum, the pathogen behind the outbreak and the novel continuity, spreads through direct contact with bodily fluids. The documented examples involve fluid contact with an infected person. Slow, deliberate, almost polite, as diseases go. Infection runs at effectively total lethality. The victim dies, and then the body gets back up working off nothing you'd recognize as biology. And here's the multiplier. The packet establishes that they continue moving indefinitely without food, water, or rest, even though their energy source remains unexplained. And a population of them just accumulates, month after month. That could strain emergency responses designed around a limited crisis timeline. The reanimated can keep moving indefinitely without food, water, or rest. It can keep moving indefinitely without food, water, or rest. And no army built to win a campaign was built to fight something that never stops needing to be fought. Remember the earlier problem, the one where seconds decided who made it home? Solanum stretches the global collapse across continents, even though an individual infection can race from exposure to reanimation in about 23 hours. A father who packed one bag and grabbed his daughter's hand still loses her, not to a monster that outran him, but to an infection that crossed a border in someone else's bloodstream long before it reached his street. Ask yourself what actually moves this thing around the globe. It isn't the zombies. The packet does not establish whether commercial flights continue operating during the outbreak. Refugees cross borders faster than screening protocols get written. The black market organ trade is one documented route by which the infection spreads. The packet describes the Chinese Politburo's cover-up as an effort to avoid appearing weak internationally, while the early response period later becomes known as the Great Denial. Political denial marks the early outbreak, while infected people spread the virus internationally through emigration, human trafficking, and the organ trade, and civilization hands over all three without much of a fight. Humanity does eventually claw back a version of order through disciplined military doctrine, ruthless clearing operations, and defensible walled communities, but only after losses that reshape the species. Refugees and the black market organ trade spread the infection across borders, even while the infected themselves move on foot. Disciplined clearing eventually works when today's enemy remains physically familiar, predictable, able to keep moving indefinitely without food, water, or rest. But nothing stranger than that. The next infection is a different kind of threat entirely. The Last of Us. Hiding underground and hoping the world calms down is no clean answer here. Cordyceps mostly thrives in underground or enclosed areas commonly avoided by people. In some zombie stories, time can work in survivors' favor as the initial chaos settles. Cordyceps does not simply let the danger fade away. The infection persists while communities keep adapting or falling apart. Infected can remain alive for decades, and some progress to later stages. A person infected today becomes a runner within roughly a day or two. Fast, aggressive, still recognizably human, under the fungus. Runners are the early stage infected. It's the least dangerous stage in the listed progression, and if you make it through that first chaotic year of bites and outbreaks and overrun cities, you don't get relief, you get clickers instead. Around the 1 year mark, surviving hosts can have fungal growth covering their eyes and start hunting by sound alone, which sounds like a downgrade until you realize echolocation makes them terrifyingly precise in the dark rooms survivors depend on for cover. Give it a few more years, and some hosts calcify into bloaters, walking fungal tanks armored in growth thick enough to shrug off gunfire. Others may remain at earlier stages unless they are exposed to the specific environmental conditions needed to progress. Think about the building at the edge of town, that outbreak site everyone abandoned in year 1 and assumed was just empty and rotting. It may still be harboring infected and fungal contamination. Closed-off spaces can still contain fungal spores and unchecked infected. That's a nastier version of the same wound this whole video keeps circling back to, the one from the engineered outbreak before this. Survival stops being a reward and starts being a resource. Ellie's survival matters because the Fireflies believed her natural immunity could be the basis for a cure. Her immunity is potential material for the Fireflies' research, not proof that a cure will follow. And Ellie is the cruelest example, because her immunity is real and confirmed, but the planned operation to create a vaccine never happened. The Fireflies planned to operate on Ellie because they believed her immunity could be the basis of a cure, and that the surgery could create a vaccine. Nothing in the story confirms it would have worked. one person's endurance, one procedure, one impossible bet, and the payoff was never guaranteed in the first place. Some infected develop later forms after several years, including bloaters described as strong and resilient. That math rarely favors the humans holding the line. Time doesn't heal this outbreak, it arms it. And somewhere else in this rundown, the horror stops waiting for biology to catch up on its own, because now there are people in lab coats helping it along on purpose. Resident Evil, T-Virus. In September of 1998, Raccoon City became the site of a devastating viral incident. Umbrella's facilities and parts of the city's infrastructure had already been contaminated by the time the outbreak became impossible to ignore. That's the detail that makes this apocalypse feel different. The outbreak grew out of a T-Virus bioweapons program, then erupted through conflict inside Umbrella. The zombies aren't really the point. Umbrella didn't stumble into a plague. It built one on purpose as a weapons program, and the shambling human infected were closer to an unwanted side effect than the intended product. Fever, itching, tissue rot, cognitive collapse, then the hunger. Depending on the strain, the course of T-Virus infection can vary, stretching from hours to something slow enough that you'd keep going to work, keep kissing your kids goodnight, keep believing you were fine while something in your bloodstream was quietly rewriting you. Cordyceps rewarded the infected for waiting. This virus rewards its own creators for pushing harder. And that's a meaner version of the same problem the last section put in your head. While Raccoon City was drowning in flesh eaters, Umbrella's actual research division was busy mutating dogs, crows, sharks, and giant spiders into standalone threats and building tyrants, intended production-level bioweapons built for combat. You learn to clear a horde with a shotgun and a steady hand? Great. Now here's something Umbrella designed specifically for that fight. Vaccines and antivirals show up against particular strains at particular stages of infection. The evidence here does not establish how reliable those vaccines are as cures, and it means the treatment that saved somebody last outbreak might do nothing at all against whatever variant just walked through the door. Umbrella engineered the virus as part of a bioweapons program, and different strains could produce different results. Intentional design colliding with whatever the biology decided to do on its own. Some fans point out that Chris, Jill, and Leon survive apparent exposure without turning. The evidence here does not establish that Chris, Jill, or Leon are immune. It's more likely a mix of luck, exposure type, and the fact that a bullet wound in a cutscene doesn't always mean canonical, so treat that theory as a theory, not a rule the universe runs on. What the universe does run on is a corporation developing bioweapons and refining them for greater reliability. You figure out how to survive one outbreak, and somewhere in a research wing, someone is already working on the next batch. Engineered monsters can still lose their handlers, tyrants get sloppy, viruses mutate off the leash, and Umbrella's own bioweapons could turn a containment failure into a disaster for everyone nearby. A greater catastrophe places that same hunger inside people powerful enough to carry extinction past the sky itself, past labs, past corporate boardrooms, and into places no containment protocol was ever written to reach. Marvel Zombies, the hunger. Imagine watching a friend eat someone and knowing that he remembers their name while he does it. That's a detail that makes Earth 2149 especially grim. The infected retain their intelligence, personality, and special abilities, but the hunger can erode their self-control and rationality. They keep their memories, their tactical training, and much of what once made them heroes, and the hunger turns them into undead flesh eaters, while leaving their intelligence, personality, and special abilities intact. Umbrella weaponized a corporation's planning against the people it was supposed to protect. This outbreak weaponizes the survivors themselves, superhuman strength and all, and it does it while preserving their intelligence, personality, and special abilities, even as hunger erodes their self-control. The contagion starts with an infected sentry, a being powerful enough to end the world on a bad day, who arrives already carrying an extraterrestrial infection. His own origin ties back into the outbreak he causes through a causal loop, a self-sustaining cosmic paradox instead of a normal patient zero event. Bite or fluid contact spreads it, and depending on the story, a full transformation can take minutes. Spider-Man, Wolverine, the Avengers, they don't shamble. They coordinate. They plan ambushes. They talk you into opening the door, and by the time you realize what's on the other side of it, the conversation is already over. And this is where it stops being survival horror and starts being something closer to cosmic accounting. A group of these zombies corners the Silver Surfer, one of the most powerful beings in the universe, and eats him, absorbing his cosmic power in the process. That alone should be the ceiling. It isn't. Empowered now, they hunt down Galactus, devourer of worlds, and consume him too. Which means the very force that used to eat planets to survive gets folded into an army that eats planets because it's hungry. Somewhere in the multiverse, there's a version of Reed Richards doing the math on that sentence and simply refusing to finish it. Every safe room this video is built up to now assumed there was somewhere left to run to. What happens when the thing chasing you can eat a godlike being, take his power, and travel through space unaided? A father protecting his kid in a locked precinct or a farmhouse basement is playing a game with rules. Earth 2149 breaks the rules by keeping the player's talent, while its zombies utterly decimate their world. For Earth 2149, the packet identifies the cause as an extra-dimensional, extraterrestrial virus, though the hunger's precise nature shifts in other stories across the multiverse. That variation barely matters next to what this account describes as fixed for its version. Competence didn't save these heroes. It left them with the intelligence, personality, and special abilities that made them dangerous in the first place. Give a zombie super strength and you've made a stronger zombie. Give it Spider-Man's brain on top of that, and you've made a hunter that studies you back. Planetary Escape still imagines somewhere left to flee. One final system makes civilization's own ingenuity manufacture the predator that consumes it. Dead Space, Necromorph Convergence. The most dangerous thing on the Ishimura is a voice that sounds exactly like someone you love, and it is coming from inside your own head. That is the marker. The signal affects the living and is also associated with corpse reanimation, feeding survivors hallucinations of grief and compulsion, and the marker can drive people into violent psychosis. People stab crewmates who were never there. People walk into airlocks chasing someone who has been dead for years. A corpse can become raw material, because necromorphs are built from reconstructed flesh, and a severed limb, even blood-soaked tissue left unattended, is a resource waiting to be reassembled into something built to kill. Recall the shape of every apocalypse before this one: intelligence, community, endurance, each one turned into a weapon against the people using it. Convergence is the point where that pattern stops being a tactic and becomes a biology. Necromorphs aren't uniform. Some are built to kill, some to infect, some to ambush, some exist purely to drag bodies back into the collection. An infector can turn an unsecured corpse into a fresh combatant in seconds, which means a fallen crewmate can become a future enemy standing in your squad. Center mass shooting barely slows them down. Survival on the Ishimura means cutting off limbs with surgical precision while something with too many joints sprints at you. And that single mechanical detail tells you everything about what this apocalypse actually wants from you, your body, intact enough to reuse. Once biomass accumulates past a certain threshold, it converges into a Brethren moon. The evidence here does not establish the scope or mechanics of Convergence collection, but the games are clear on the cycle that follows. The moon isn't the end of it, it's the start of the next one. Brethren moons broadcast marker signals to intelligent species, guiding them to build the very device that will unmake them, then harvest the resulting outbreak into another moon. Unitologists call this transcendence. Universal unification, they call it, the species becoming something greater. What the games actually show is a civilization's intelligence spent building its own trap, its panic spent stocking the trap with bodies, its rescue efforts spent concentrating survivors in one place for easier harvest, the believers who build the marker, the soldiers who die defending it, the scientists who study it, the families who mourn beside it. All of it feeds the same outcome. Whether any consciousness survives inside a Brethren moon and what the ending of Dead Space 3 means for humanity's ultimate prospects are genuinely open questions among fans. Thin theory rather than settled record. What's confirmed is colder than that mystery anyway. Somewhere on that station, a person just wanted one sealed door between themselves and the noise, and someone standing beside them to still be breathing when the door opened again. The marker doesn't erase that, it just files it as inventory. The evidence here does not establish the fate of an entire surviving civilization, but what it does establish is enough. A species can spend its whole intelligence, its whole panic, its whole grief, feeding the exact machine built to end it. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.